So Halloween is not the scariest thing going on this month. If you are buying or selling a house, no doubt you are experiencing suspense, fear, anxiousness, and plenty of sleepless nights. So how do you deal with it? That's what we're talking about today. So I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and it was a very familiar conversation, particularly over the last couple years. And the conversation stemmed around fear of the unknown. Buying and selling a home, whether you're buying your first home, selling a property and buying another, the whole process is extremely scary, especially now. So there are a lot of moving parts when you're buying and selling a home. And my job is to try to predict those steps as much as possible. The more I can predict, the smoother the process will be, the smoother the transaction will be, which will reduce the stress for my clients. Unfortunately, we can't predict everything. There are many, many moving parts that we just don't have control over. How long will the house take to sell? What if it sells right away and you can't find another property? How long will it take to find another property? Once you find another property, will the seller accept your offer? What happens if you get an accepted offer and you have a home inspection and you find out there's a ton of issues with the house and you don't want to go forward with buying the property? Selling and buying a home is like building a house of cards. Every step in the transaction, you're adding another layer. And unfortunately, any time during that transaction, something could disrupt that house and you pull that card out and the whole thing could come tumbling down. The buyers could back out on the house that you're trying to sell. They could lose their financing. They could lose a job. The home inspection that they have could reveal issues on the house that you're selling. The home inspection that you have on the house you're buying could have issues. The buyers for the house you're selling could change their mind. If you're a buyer, the sellers that you're trying to buy the house from could change their mind. Now, there are contingencies built in to help with some of these to kind of keep people going forward and create some guidelines and borders of during the transaction. But the downside is if a seller wants to back out of a transaction and that you're on a house that you're trying to buy, legally, when they enter into a contract, it's a binding contract. The problem is we can't force the seller up front immediately. We can't force the seller to sell the property. So ultimately what will happen is yes, you can take them to small claims court and you can file a lawsuit and you can tie up the property for months. That process could take 2, 4, 6 months or longer, and all that does is create more pain for you as the buyer, or more pain for you as the seller if the buyer decides to just back out at the last minute. Yes, there are repercussions, and yes, the buyer does lose their deposit, which helps when you're selling the property. But, if they back out because the mortgage contingency is exercised, they lose their financing for whatever reason, they're going to get their deposit back out with no repercussions. So you're kind of stuck with putting the house back on the market. The other thing that can be scary right now, especially, is the real estate market. The market right now is very volatile, changing daily, and it's hard to predict. I go by, the leading economists and real estate experts in the country to kind of gain, guidance as far as where the market is heading. Take that information, apply it to hyper local to find out what's going on in our area, and then try to guide my clients that way, based on the data. But it's not foolproof, and we don't know, and that unknown can be a scary factor. We can look at what's happened in the last 6 months, and the last 6 months will say, yes, house is sold, less than a month, less than 2 weeks, 110% of asking price. Like, we can look at that, but we can't bank on it. We can't we can't go through the numbers and for certain say, yes, you're going to get 110% of asking price. So that unknown can be a little scary as well. And the last component, which stemmed the conversation I had with my client the other day, is the not knowing the exact cost of ownership until you actually get into the property. This is particularly scary for my first-time home buyers. So, obviously the mortgage payment is predictable. The mortgage lenders are required by law to be within a certain percentage of their estimate for closing costs. If you get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, that rate will be locked in. Your mortgage payment will be locked in. But the taxes are adjustable. So, the taxes that they use to qualify you, those taxes are not going to be the same number every year for the lifetime that you're in the property. Homeowners insurance will not be the same. Homeowners insurance typically goes up, and especially if we're in a coastal town, so flood zone lines get redrawn and, things change. So that is something to take into consideration as well. Utility costs. I get this question all the time, what are the average utility costs, so we can figure out, how the affordability of the property. And that's subjective, right? So if a property is being occupied by a single person who works in the city who's never home, that's going to be a stark difference in consumption of electricity and heating fuel and so forth, compared to a family of 5, with young kids that are at home. And I know it's hard to try to budget and try to figure out and we want to try to make sure that we're careful with our money so that we don't get into situations where we're over our head. And there are some things that you can do to prepare yourself to kind of allow you to kind of go with that ebb and flow of the cost of the home ownership. So you look at all these reasons for why real estate is scary, and you might say, why the heck would anybody want to go through that process? Why would you want to succumb yourself to all that pain? And at the end of the day, there are some ways that you can lessen the pain. One of the things I always, talk to my clients about is I try to elevate what their level of risk is. And the level of risk is going to be it's going to be different for everyone. Some people are very, very, okay with taking more riskier decisions, and for certain we're talking calculated risks. We're not being completely just throwing caution to the wind and doing whatever with the mortgage payment. The mortgage company says we're going to approve for $500, but our budget says $350. That's not what I'm talking about. But in terms of figuring out, I had a client the other day who was selling a property and buying another, and we went through the process. We went through put together a plan of what made sense for them, and they are less risk averse, so they were more amenable to putting the house on the market with a home purchase contingency, or maybe even not accepting, not requiring a home purchase contingency from their buyers, and then worrying about buying a property after the fact. And they said, we'll figure it out, and we have a security blanket, we have a family member we can stay with if necessary. We'll figure it out. Now you flip that, and I've had clients that are white knuckling it the entire time. They need to know as much as we can lock people in, as much as we can put a plan together that is as foolproof as possible. That's what they want. So where you fall on that risk adverse line really depends on you, and that's why sitting down to make a plan to establish that foundation, of that house of cards, figuring out what that foundation is, that in order to get that solid foundation, that's one of the main components. How risk averse are you? What plan is going to make most sense for you and your family, so that we can make sure that we're executing, in a way that's going to be costing you the least amount of stress. So another way to reduce the scariness of the process is to lean into your professionals. I always tell people when I'm first working with someone, you need to trust who you're working with. You need to feel comfortable with the person you're working with. And if I start working with a client and we just don't click, I'm okay with them moving on to someone else. That is totally fine. It's critically important when you get to that top tier of that house of cards and all of a sudden it starts to wobble. You've got to be able to lean into your professional for guidance and support. And the same thing goes with your lender. You need to find a lender that is someone that is trustworthy, that's someone that you can lean on, that is going to be there to answer your questions, give you the guidance that you need. So I always tell my clients that, this is an emotional process. Occasionally there'll be that buyer or seller, that engineer type that is, the least amount of emotion that a person can possibly have, very much by the numbers, but that's not normal. When you are selling a home that you've been in, that have created memories in, that's an emotional sale. When you're looking to buy something that you're going to live in, possibly, raise a family in, that's an emotional process. There's no way for a buyer or seller to take emotion out of the process. And that's where I come in. That's where professionals come in. We are the unemotional. We are the pragmatic. We're the ones that will come in to be that person to lean on, so that when it gets overwhelming, when the process gets scary, when it becomes intense, my job is to chime in and say, okay, it's all right. Let's take a step back and really look at the reasons that you're reacting this way. I always say that, whenever there's issues, questions, I always say, look at the question beyond the question, right? Somebody says, well, why is it this way? And I say, why are you asking why is it this way? What's the reason behind the question? Because only then do we really find out where the fear and the anxiousness is coming from, and then I can help them and I can relieve that fear, with anxiousness as much as possible. From my perspective, it doesn't matter. I don't have skin in the game on whether that sale goes through. My concern is that my client gets from their goal of this place to this place, or from their rental to their first home. Taking care of the client, not making sure the transaction is part of the process, but at the end of the day, if the client in their best interest decides that, this is not the right house for them, that it doesn't matter whether they buy that house. Okay, what matters to me is that they're doing what's right for them. And that's kind of the role of where as real estate agents, that's what our goal and our role should be, is to serve those clients at that level. And only then can we kind of help them, work through that fear and anxiousness, and get through it to get to the goal. And then finally, as far as the money is concerned and not knowing exactly how much things are going to cost, my suggestion, my strong suggestion is always budget for more than you need. Sounds simple, but if you know that you have this budgeted, you know that you have a reserve that is not being used for down payment, closing costs, completely separate from a transaction. You have that safety net there, so that when you move into the house and you find out that, something breaks unexpected, because things happen, there's no way if, ands, or buts, things happen, then you have that safety net to catch you when you fall. And if you have that already set up, I'm going to remind you have that set up. So when the world starts caving in on you and you say, oh my gosh, the numbers, can I really afford this? Then what my job is to pull you back and say, look at your budget. Look at your proposed budget. Everything is there, everything to the best of your knowledge, and the things that aren't there are going to be taken care of by the reserve. That is probably, yes, are there things that are above and beyond? You get laid off from work. There are things that your reserve may not be able to cover, and that's life, right? That's life, whether you buy a house or not. That's life. But in terms of things that are applicable to that particular purchase on that house, then you do the budget, and that will be, that budget will help soothe, calm your anxiousness. So at the end of the day, there's absolutely no guarantee. Buying and selling a home can be extremely scary. There are, risks are inevitable. There's no avoiding them. There's no way for us to completely guarantee anything in this transaction because anything could happen. But the thing that will pull you through and the reason why you do it is that home ownership, absolutely hands down, is the single best investment, single best vehicle for your money, the best way to hedge against inflation. I can't pound that drum loud enough right now. As things are getting more expensive, you lock in on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. For the next 30 years, that mortgage payment is not changing. Inflation, things will get more expensive, the gas prices go up, fuel prices will go up, in terms of heating, oil, and propane and so forth. But your mortgage payment will always stay the same. It's a predictable outcome. And for certain, especially now with the rental rates increasing astronomically, there's no better investment than being in a home. And if you're making that jump from selling a home that maybe you've outgrown and getting into a new home, yes, it will be scary, but it's a short-term pain. It's a short-term sleepless nights. For those of you that have had kids, it doesn't last forever. Eventually they get to the point where they sleep through the night, hopefully, and then you move on. And so, you keep that goal in mind. That's how you get there. And the goal is absolutely worth it. So hopefully this didn't scare you out of doing buying or selling a home for certain. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a very happy Halloween. And if you like this video, please subscribe. I post videos every Wednesday on real estate community and home tech. Thank you for watching. Have a happy Halloween, and we'll see you soon.